The sun was setting like a slow burn over the jagged ridges of the canyon, painting the sky in streaks of crimson and gold. Dust swirled in restless currents across the dry plain, carrying the faint scent of sage and the bitter tang of fear. From the edge of the rocky bluff, a mother's voice cut through the wind, sharp and desperate. "Save my son," she cried, her voice raw with panic, echoing across the empty valley. Her eyes, wide with terror, scanned the horizon for any sign of help, but the only movement was the whispering grasses and the distant caw of a lone raven. The boy she called for was not yet lost to the world, but he was dangerously close. His small form had wandered too near the line where the settlers' rifles met the open prairie, and danger crouched there, silent, patient, and unforgiving. Her chest heaved as she struggled to keep herself from running, from plunging into the open where death might be waiting. She knew running would do nothing. All she had was her voice, and the hope that anyone might hear it and act. Then, against the dying light, a figure appeared. He moved with a quiet certainty, almost as if the desert itself guided him. His skin was bronzed from the sun, his hair dark and tied back in a braid that swung gently as he walked. The woman's breath caught. She knew somehow that this man was not like the others who roamed these lands. He was an Apache, tall and unyielding, yet his eyes held a stillness that made it seem he could read the heartbeat of the world itself. For a moment, he paused at the crest of the hill, turning his gaze toward her. He said nothing. The wind tugged at the edges of his worn clothing, but he stood unmoved, silent as the stones beneath his feet. She called out again, louder, her desperation cutting through the cooling air. "Please, my son, you have to save him." Still, the Apache remained silent. Her fear burned hotter now, and tears ran down her cheeks. She did not know his name, nor did she know why he had stopped when the danger was so close. And yet something in his stillness gave her a strange hope, fragile as it was. The boy's life balanced on the edge of a knife, and somewhere deep in her bones, she felt that this man might do the impossible. Time seemed to stretch. The horizon shifted slowly, shadows lengthening across the cracked earth. In the distance, she glimpsed movement, the glint of steel, the sudden flash of eyes trained on her child. Her voice shook with urgency as she tried again. "Don't let him take him, please." The Apache finally moved, but not in the way she expected. He did not rush, he did not yell or brandish a weapon. Instead, he stepped lightly, each footfall measured, as though the ground itself welcomed him. Dust kicked up around his moccasins, and the wind seemed to part just enough to make a path. He was calm, almost impossibly so, but there was a force in him, quiet and undeniable, that made the woman feel that nothing in this world could stop him if he chose to act. Memories flashed through her mind, brief and unbidden. She thought of the stories her father had told her about the Apaches, their courage, their fierceness, their code of honor. Many feared them, few understood them. Here he was, standing between her and the unthinkable, a wall of silence against the chaos that threatened to consume her son. The boy's small form trembled near the edge of the canyon, too frightened to move, too curious to turn away. He had wandered into a place no child should ever be, drawn by something unseen. The mother's hands clenched at her chest as she whispered prayers that felt as fragile as the dying light around them. And then she noticed the Apache's eyes, dark, deep, steady. They did not flicker with fear nor with hesitation. They held the promise of action, the certainty of a man who could do what others would not even dare attempt. A sudden shout broke the tension. Voices rose from the distance, men, chasing shadows, rifles aimed at innocent life. The boy froze, wide-eyed, and the woman's scream tore through the valley. The Apache's head turned slightly, just enough to register the threat. Then, without a word, he began to move faster, yet still with that careful grace that seemed impossible on such rough terrain. Each step was deliberate, each motion exact. The dust rose in clouds, the wind whistled past, and yet he seemed untouched by the chaos around him. The mother's heart pounded so loudly she feared the boy might hear it and become even more frightened. "Hurry, please," she called, almost losing herself to the rawness of her panic. The Apache's pace quickened, but he never ran. He seemed to flow, bending to the contours of the canyon, slipping through the jagged rocks and sudden drop-offs with an ease that defied human limits. As he neared her son, the mother could hardly breathe. The men chasing had not yet noticed him, their eyes fixed on the boy, their minds certain that nothing would interfere with their prey. But the Apache did not falter. His hand reached toward the boy, steady and unshakable. Oh. In that instant, the woman felt time pause. The world held its breath. She saw the impossible taking shape before her eyes, and then it happened. The Apache lifted the boy as if he weighed nothing, carrying him away from danger, away from the rifles and shouting men. The boy clung to him, trembling, while the mother ran toward them, tears streaming down her face. She wanted to speak, to thank, to plead, but her voice caught in her throat. All she could do was watch, wide-eyed, as the man who had been silent, who had appeared almost like a shadow on the cliffs, became the savior she had prayed for. But the moment was far from over. From the distance, the shouts grew louder, the footsteps faster. The Apache moved with a calm that seemed almost supernatural, but the threat was closing in. The mother's chest tightened with fear again. Could he truly protect them both? Could he escape the men who came for her child with nothing but determination and skill as his weapons? She could not see his face clearly in the last rays of the sun, but she felt his presence, his unspoken promise to guard, to shield, to fight if needed. Yet the shadow of doubt lingered. The danger was real, the men relentless, and the canyon offered few places to hide. Every second stretched into a lifetime, and every heartbeat seemed louder than the last. The boy clutched at the Apache's shoulders, frightened but sensing safety in his arms. The mother reached them, her legs trembling, her lungs burning, but she dared not slow the pace of the man who had taken the impossible upon himself. She whispered again, a mix of gratitude and terror, "Please, keep him safe. Please." The Apache glanced back once, a flicker of something almost human passing across his expression. Perhaps acknowledgement, perhaps reassurance. Then he faced forward, moving with the precision of one who had lived his life in harmony with danger, with survival, with honor. And as the last light of the day sank behind the distant ridges, casting long shadows over the canyon floor, the mother knew the story had only just begun. The boy was alive for now. The Apache had done the impossible, but the journey was far from over. Something hung in the air, a tension that made her stomach twist and her heart beat faster. The danger had not vanished. The men would come. The desert would test them. And the fate of her son rested entirely in the hands of a man who spoke little, but whose actions promised everything. The wind whispered across the canyon, carrying with it the scent of dust, sage, and anticipation. The mother held her breath as she followed, feeling both awe and fear. She had seen what she'd never imagined possible. And yet she understood the truth now. Nothing in this world could be taken for granted. And heroes often appeared where least expected. And so, with the boy clinging to the Apache and the shadows stretching long over the unforgiving land, they moved forward into the unknown. The woman did not know what lay ahead, and the man did not speak, but a bond had been forged in silence and courage. Somewhere beyond the canyon, danger waited, relentless and unyielding. And the impossible was only the beginning. The canyon walls rose around them, jagged and unyielding, casting long shadows that crept like dark fingers over the ground. The boy clung tightly to the Apache, his small hands gripping the folds of the man's worn shirt. His eyes darted from shadow to shadow, as if expecting the threat to leap out at any moment. The mother followed close behind, stumbling over rocks and loose sand, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on them, a heaviness that made her stomach twist with fear and anticipation. The Apache moved with a steady confidence that seemed almost impossible in such rough terrain. Each step was deliberate, each motion precise, as if he knew the canyon as intimately as his own shadow. He never looked back, never faltered, yet the tension in the air was palpable. The mother wanted to speak, to ask questions, to understand who this man was, and why he had appeared in their lives at the moment they needed him most. But she knew now was not the time. Questions could wait. Survival could not. As they pressed forward, the wind whispered through the canyon, carrying with it the faint, distant sounds of pursuit. The men who had been chasing the boy were relentless, their shouts and curses echoing off the rock walls. The mother's heart pounded in her chest. Every sound, every shift in the shadows, felt like a warning. She glanced at the Apache, hoping for a sign, any indication that he could protect them. But his expression remained unreadable, calm as still water, eyes sharp and watchful. Eventually, the narrow canyon opened into a small, hidden basin, a place where the sun's last rays barely touched the ground. Here, the Apache slowed, crouching low as he assessed the surroundings. The boy clung closer, his fear mingled with awe at the man who had carried him through danger as if it were nothing. The mother sank to her knees, hands pressed against the warm, dry earth, trying to catch her breath. Her chest heaved, but relief was short-lived. The danger had not passed. The Apache finally spoke, his voice low and measured, carrying a weight of authority that seemed to command even the wind itself. "We cannot stay long. It will follow." His words were simple, yet they carried a depth that made the mother understand the seriousness of the situation. He did not explain who he was or why he was helping them. There was no time for stories, only action. The mother tried to gather her thoughts. She had grown up hearing tales of the Apaches, stories of warriors who could move through the desert like shadows, who could disappear when no one expected, and who fought with a code of honor that was as rigid as the cliffs themselves. But she had never imagined meeting one in such a moment, let alone having her son's life placed in his hands. Now those stories felt very real, very immediate, and she realized that every lesson from the past could not have prepared her for this. The boy, shivering but safe, whispered something under his breath. The mother leaned closer to hear, her ears straining. "He's like a shadow," the child said, awe and fear mingling in his voice. "Just knows." The mother nodded, though she did not speak, understanding the truth in her son's words. There was something almost otherworldly about the man. He moved with certainty in a world that offered none, a calm in the storm of chaos that had threatened to consume them both. The Apache scanned the perimeter, his eyes moving quickly, methodically, as if tracing invisible lines only he could see. The mother noticed the slight tension in his shoulders, the subtle shift in his stance. Though he appeared calm, she realized that he was preparing for what was to come. Danger had a way of finding the unprepared, and he had learned long ago that hesitation could be fatal. As the shadows grew longer, the mother's thoughts drifted to questions she dared not voice. Who was this man? Why had he chosen to save her son? And most importantly, could he protect them both against the threat that was surely closing in? She wanted answers, but she understood that answers would come later, if at all. For now, all she could do was follow and trust the impossible. The Apache moved again, leading them along a narrow ledge that hugged the canyon wall. Below, the ground fell sharply into darkness, a sheer drop that would have terrified anyone unaccustomed to the land. The mother's palms were slick with sweat, her fingers clutching the rocks for support. The boy, though scared, mirrored the Apache's steadiness, holding tight and moving with him, as if guided by an instinct deeper than fear. Along the way, the mother caught glimpses of clues about the man's past. His clothes were worn but well made, his boots sturdy, scarred from years of travel and hardship. There was a quiet dignity in him, a sense of experience that spoke of battles fought and challenges overcome. He carried no weapon, yet there was a power in his presence, a sense that he could face the world without one if necessary. She wondered what he had seen, what he had lost, and what had led him to this moment where he would risk everything for a stranger and her child. The boy's voice broke the silence, small but persistent. "Where are we going?" The Apache glanced at him, his eyes softening ever so slightly, though he did not speak immediately. Finally he said, "Somewhere safe, for now." The mother felt a surge of hope at his words, though she knew better than to believe the danger was truly gone. The words offered comfort, but they were also a reminder of the uncertainty that still surrounded them. As they moved deeper into the canyon, the mother's mind raced. She remembered the stories of settlers and warriors, of betrayals and alliances, of courage and desperation. She realized that this moment, this flight through danger alongside a man who seemed larger than life, was part of a larger story, one that she had only begun to glimpse. The canyon walls seemed to close in around them, the shadows deepening, as if the land itself held its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Suddenly, a noise echoed through the basin, sharp, metallic, and unmistakable. The mother froze, heart hammering. The Apache did not hesitate. He dropped low, pressing the boy close to his chest and guiding the mother behind him. His eyes scanned the area, sharp and calculating, reading the terrain like a map written in shadows and dust. The sound came again, closer this time, and she realized with a jolt that their pursuers were near, relentless and determined. The mother whispered, almost to herself, "How can one man be enough?" The Apache's steady presence offered an unspoken answer. Strength is not measured by numbers, but by courage, skill, and resolve. He moved with precision, positioning them where the shadows were deepest, the rocks most protective. He did not speak, but his actions conveyed a strategy, a plan that she could not yet understand, but which gave her a fragile hope. The boy clung even tighter, his small body shaking. The mother wrapped an arm around him, trying to offer comfort even as she felt the same fear gripping her heart. Every instinct screamed to run, to hide, to fight, but she realized that none of it mattered. The Apache was leading, guiding, protecting, and for now that was enough. The danger was real, but so was the man who had done what seemed impossible. Hours passed in tense silence. The canyon shifted as the sun disappeared, leaving the world cloaked in shadows. The wind whispered secrets across the rocks, carrying hints of danger and promise alike. The mother could see the determination etched into the Apache's face, the quiet intensity of a man who had faced far worse and survived. She began to understand that this was not just courage, it was a lifetime of experience, of living on the edge, of understanding the land, the people, and the delicate balance between life and death. Every step, every careful motion, deepened the mystery of who he was. He spoke little, but his presence said more than words ever could. The mother realized that the boy's life had become intertwined with someone extraordinary, someone who existed on the margins of both worlds, the settlers and the Apaches, the known and the unknown. And she knew that the path ahead would demand more than courage. It would demand trust, resilience, and a willingness to confront dangers they could barely imagine. As night fell, the canyon became a labyrinth of shadows and hidden paths. The mother, exhausted but alert, followed as the Apache led them deeper into the unknown. Somewhere in the darkness, the sounds of pursuit lingered, a reminder that the danger was far from gone. She glanced at the boy who had fallen asleep against the man's chest, trusting without question. The mother felt a mix of awe, fear, and gratitude. She had witnessed the impossible once, but she knew it could not be the last time. And so, in the quiet, shadowed canyon, they pressed onward. The mother understood that the story of this night, of this flight, was only beginning. Questions remained unanswered. Threats remained unchallenged. And the man who had performed the impossible remained a mystery, a silent protector whose past and future were as hidden as the canyon walls themselves. The tension lingered, thick as the desert air, promising that what lay ahead would test them a land, that the impossible might have only just begun. The night had swallowed the canyon completely. Only the faintest traces of starlight slipped between the cliffs, casting dim, shifting shadows over the jagged ground. The mother pressed herself against the cold rock, her body trembling, though not from the chill. The boy lay curled in the Apache's arms, breathing softly in sleep, his small form seeming impossibly fragile in the darkness. She watched the man's face, partially hidden in shadow, and felt the weight of the mystery pressing down on her. Every instinct in her screamed that the night was far from over, that danger still lurked just beyond the faint glow of the stars. The Apache moved with the certainty of one who belonged to the land itself. He adjusted his hold on the boy, shifting silently, listening to the canyon. The wind whispered faintly, and in that sound he seemed to hear more than the woman could imagine. It was not just the terrain he knew, it was the patterns of life and death, of footsteps and intentions. The mother realized she could not begin to comprehend the depth of his understanding, but she knew one thing clearly: he would not let them fall into harm's way. From somewhere deeper in the canyon came the distant echo of voices. The mother's heart jumped. The men who had chased them earlier were persistent. She could almost picture them, moving through the darkness with the cruel certainty of men accustomed to taking what they wanted. Their shouts had faded with distance, but that did not mean they had given up. Fear coiled in her stomach like a living thing. The boy stirred, murmuring in his sleep, and the mother reached to steady him, brushing his hair from his forehead. "It's okay," she whispered, more to herself than to him. She felt the truth of her words as a fragile thread, fragile because she did not yet know if it could hold. The Apache, sensing the moment, shifted closer, his presence a shield that the mother could neither see nor touch fully. Yet she felt it in every careful motion he made. The night stretched on, and the mother thought back to the day it had all begun. How quickly the ordinary could turn into the extraordinary. She remembered the quiet morning when her son had wandered too far, when her calls for help had been answered by a stranger who seemed both ordinary and impossible. She had not known then that this man carried not just strength, but the weight of something deeper, something older than the land itself. She could sense that his life had been shaped by countless trials, by a code of honor and survival she could not fully grasp, and yet she relied on it now more than ever. As the canyon wound tighter, the mother noticed signs that the Apache's knowledge of the land was more than instinct. Small marks on the rocks, subtle shifts in the path. Places where the loose earth suggested hidden crevices or sudden drops, he navigated each with care. Avoiding dangers she did not even perceive, the boy clung to him as if sensing that the man knew where safety could be found. She realized that the Apache's silence was not emptiness, but strategy. He communicated with the world through observation, through action, through every deliberate step. A faint light flickered in the distance, a glimmer like fire reflecting off stone. The mother tensed. Could it be the men, or something else entirely? She did not know, but the Apache did not hesitate. He adjusted their position, guiding them along a narrow ledge that kept them hidden from view, using shadows and terrain like a shield. Every movement he made seemed precise, as if he had walked this path countless times before. The mother marveled, yet fear remained tight in her chest. Suddenly, the boy stirred fully awake, eyes wide in the dark. "Are they following us?" he asked, voice trembling. The mother reached to comfort him, but the Apache placed a hand lightly on the boy's shoulder, steadying him with a quiet authority. "Watch and listen," he said softly. "Not all danger comes from what you see." The words were simple, yet they carried a depth the mother could feel. There were threats beyond human sight, beyond sound, beyond expectation. The night itself seemed alive with possibility. The mother realized that they were no longer just fleeing, they were being tested. Every twist in the canyon, every shadow that fell across the rocks, was a puzzle. Every sound in the darkness could be a warning. The Apache, silent and vigilant, seemed to move not only to protect, but to teach them how to survive in a world that was suddenly more dangerous than she had ever imagined. A new sound reached them, a faint rustling, like dry leaves stirred by movement. The mother froze, clutching the boy closer. The Apache's eyes sharpened, scanning the darkness with a focus that made her feel small and helpless in comparison. He moved like a ghost through the canyon, positioning himself so that the rustling could be observed without revealing their location. The mother felt the tension in the air, a palpable coil of fear and anticipation that seemed to grow tighter with every passing second. Then she understood that the canyon held secrets beyond the immediate threat. Signs of past travelers, old markings on stone, hidden caves, and faint paths that suggested the land had been lived in and fought over for generations. She wondered what stories the Apache had seen etched in this land, what memories clung to the rocks and shadows. He carried knowledge that was both personal and ancestral, a map of survival written in silence and experience. And she realized that their flight was not merely about escaping pursuers, it was about stepping into a world that she had never known existed, where life and death were decided by instinct, courage, and understanding that transcended ordinary comprehension. The boy's small hand tugged at her sleeve. "Will they find us?" he asked, fear clear in his voice. The mother wanted to lie, to promise safety, but she could not. All she could do was trust the Apache, follow his lead, and hope that the invisible shield he seemed to carry would hold them through the night. The man did not speak, but his movements reassured them both. He guided them carefully along the jagged rocks, stopping only to survey the terrain, listening to the canyon, sensing currents in the air that told him more than she could ever understand. Hours seemed to pass in near silence. The mother's mind wandered to the men who pursued them. Who were they? Why did they care so much about her son? She did not know, and the Apache gave no explanation. Perhaps it was not her place to know yet. Perhaps the answers would reveal themselves when the danger had been faced, or perhaps they would remain mysteries forever, like the land itself. She understood that the man's actions spoke louder than words, that the protection he offered was a gift born of instinct and choice, and that their survival rested on his skill, courage, and unwavering resolve. In the distance, a low sound, almost imperceptible, reached them again. The mother held her breath. The Apache stopped immediately, crouching low, ears straining, eyes scanning the darkness. She felt the tension tighten, a cord pulled taut across her chest. The danger was still near. The night held it in waiting, patient and relentless. She knew they could not rest. Every step, every choice, carried consequences she could not predict. And yet, amidst the fear, there was awe. She watched the boy, sleeping fitfully in the man's arms, and she realized that courage often came in unexpected forms. The Apache had done what no one else could, saving her son from certain danger. But she understood that this night was not over, that the true challenge lay ahead. In the unseen threats, in the relentless uncertainty of the canyon, and in the forces that sought to undo them both, the wind shifted, carrying a faint smell of smoke, or perhaps fire from a distant camp. The mother's heart jumped. The Apache's gaze followed it instantly, and he moved again, silently, as if responding to a command only he could hear. She followed, weary and cautious, her mind racing with questions. Who were these people? What did they want with her son? Why had fate placed them in the path of someone so extraordinary, someone capable of bending danger to his will? The night deepened, and the canyon seemed to close in around them. Shadows shifted with every flicker of starlight, creating illusions, false paths, hidden threats. The mother's senses were stretched to their limit. She could feel the tension in the air, the pull of fear and anticipation, the quiet insistence that nothing was certain, and that every moment could change the outcome of their flight. And still, the Apache moved with calm authority, navigating the darkness with precision and skill. He did not speak of the danger ahead, or of the choices they would have to make. He simply guided, protected, and persisted. The mother began to understand that this night was as much a test as it was a flight, that the lessons were in the silence, in the observation, in the trust placed in one man who had done the impossible once and might have to do it again. As the first hint of pre-dawn light crept along the canyon walls, the mother felt both relief and dread. The night had passed, but the danger had not. The pursuers, the unknown threats, the unseen forces all remained, patient and relentless. She looked at the Apache, whose eyes remained as sharp as when they had first met, and realized that the true challenge had only just begun. Every step forward would demand courage, every choice would carry risk, and the impossible might have only grown larger in the dark. The first light of dawn barely touched the canyon rim, leaving the world below shrouded in shadows and uncertainty. The mother's legs ached from hours of scrambling over jagged rocks and clinging to the Apache's every movement. She could not stop. Not now. Not when her son's life depended on every careful step forward. She could feel the tension coiling tighter with each passing second, a quiet roar in her chest that refused to be silenced. The boy stirred again, eyes half open, his small hand brushing against the Apache's chest. "Are we safe?" he whispered, voice trembling with the fragility of sleep and fear. The man did not answer immediately. He moved with the same deliberate precision, adjusting their path along a narrow ledge where loose rocks threatened to give way at any moment. The mother watched him, heart pounding, realizing that the danger was not just in the men who might still be chasing them. It was everywhere. The canyon itself could be deadly, every step a test of balance, judgment, and nerve. Then, faint but unmistakable, a sound reached her ears, a snap of a twig, the rustle of heavy boots over loose stones. The mother froze, clenching the boy close. Her pulse leaped. The pursuers had found their trail. She dared not breathe, and the Apache's calm shifted ever so slightly. His eyes narrowed, scanning the shadows with an intensity that made her feel exposed, vulnerable, and yet strangely protected. The boy whispered again, almost too softly for her to hear. "They're coming." The mother's stomach twisted, a deep knot of fear she could not untie. The Apache moved faster now, guiding them along the jagged path with silent authority. Every instinct in her screamed that they could not outrun what was coming. She realized that survival depended on more than speed. It depended on trust, on following the man who had already done what no one else could. As they turned a bend in the canyon, the mother caught a glimpse of something that made her blood run cold. Figures in the distance, moving deliberately, eyes fixed on their path. The men had weapons, yes, but more dangerous than that was their determination, the cold certainty in their movements. They were hunters, and the prey they sought had a boy's life hanging in the balance. The mother swallowed hard, trying to steady herself, as the Apache led them down a narrow chute that twisted deep into shadow. The canyon walls seemed to close in around them, pressing in from all sides, as if the land itself were conspiring with the pursuers. Dust and pebbles shifted beneath their feet, threatening to betray their position. The boy clung tightly, small hands gripping the Apache's shirt, and she felt the fragility of his life in every touch. She whispered reassurances, though she had none to give. The fear was raw, immediate, unrelenting, and it consumed her even as she tried to focus on moving forward. The Apache stopped suddenly, crouching low behind a jagged outcrop. His eyes swept the shadows, noting every detail, the distant shapes of the men, the angle of the sun catching on metal, the way dust moved across the canyon floor. He gestured for them to remain quiet, and the mother felt the tension press even harder against her chest. She understood that this was more than hiding. This was strategy, patience, and timing, all wrapped in silence. Hours seemed to stretch as the sun rose higher, though the canyon remained a maze of shadows. The mother tried to follow the Apache's silent commands, inching forward when he did, freezing when he froze. The boy's breathing was shallow, as if he knew that the slightest sound could mean disaster. Every rock, every shadow, every gust of wind was a potential threat. And in that moment the mother realized that the danger was no longer just outside. It was in the land itself, in the impossible calculus of survival that the Apache had mastered, but she could barely comprehend. A faint glimmer of movement caught her eye. One of the pursuers, scouting ahead, was close. Too close. The mother's stomach tightened. She wanted to scream, to warn them, but she knew that sound would be the end of them. The Apache's hand brushed against her arm, a signal to remain still. His eyes met hers, calm, unwavering. But she could feel the intensity behind them. Every muscle in his body was ready, anticipating, calculating. He had done the impossible once before, and she knew he could do it again. But the margin for error was smaller than it had ever been. The canyon twisted sharply, leading them into a narrow crevice where the walls were so close that even the boy had to turn sideways to pass. The mother felt the air grow colder, the shadows deeper, and the sense of being trapped more suffocating. She wondered how many others had tried to flee through this place and failed, how many had vanished in the unforgiving landscape. She dared not think too long, for fear would paralyze her. The Apache moved steadily, leading them with certainty that belied the danger around them. Then came a sound that made her blood run cold, a shout, distant but growing, followed by the crack of a rifle. The mother's chest tightened as she pressed the boy closer. He jolted awake, eyes wide with terror. "They found us," he cried. The mother shook her head, trying to calm him even as her own fear surged. But the Apache did not falter. He moved faster now, guiding them through twisting passages, ducking under overhangs, and navigating ledges that seemed impossible to traverse. Every step was deliberate, every motion precise. The sounds of pursuit grew louder, echoing off the canyon walls. The mother felt the urgency, the desperation in every footstep behind them. The men were relentless, trained, and merciless. She understood that they could not be outrun forever. The Apache had to confront them or they would be trapped, helpless in the unforgiving land. The tension pressed harder with every moment, a relentless force that made her heart pound and her breath come in short, desperate gasps. They emerged onto a ledge high above the canyon floor, a narrow path with sheer drops on either side. The mother's legs wobbled, and she gripped the Apache's arm for support. The boy clung even tighter, his small body trembling. The pursuers were close now, their shouts angry, full of impatience. The mother realized that the moment of confrontation was near. She could feel it in every shift of the wind, every movement in the shadows. Something was about to happen. Something that would demand courage, skill, and perhaps even luck beyond measure. The Apache paused, crouched low, and scanned the canyon below. His eyes, dark and steady, took in every detail of the positions of the pursuers, the angles of their approach, the paths that could be used for escape or defense. He did not speak, but the mother felt the weight of his focus, the power of his experience, and the calm determination that had already saved her son once. She wondered what he was planning, what impossible feat he was about to attempt, and whether it would be enough. The wind shifted again, carrying the faint scent of smoke and the dry metallic temps of dust kicked up by approaching boots. The mother's stomach tightened with fear. The boy whispered, "Will we make it?" The mother could not answer. All she could do was hold him closer and trust the man who had already defied the impossible. She could feel the pulse of danger, thick and suffocating, pressing against them from all sides. The moment of reckoning was approaching, and there was no turning back. The Apache signaled them forward, leading them along a precarious ledge that hugged the canyon wall. Below, the pursuers were visible now, moving with determination, shouting orders, rifles raised. The mother felt the full weight of the moment, the lives of herself and her son hanging in balance, the canyon offering no forgiveness, the pursuers relentless in their pursuit. Every instinct screamed that disaster was imminent. Then, a sudden movement. One of the pursuers had spotted them, a rifle lifted, eyes locking onto their position. The mother's breath caught, and the boy clung so tightly it hurt. She felt time slow, the world narrowing to a single point of tension, a heartbeat before impact. The Apache's hand shot out, steadying them both, his eyes flashing with calculated resolve. He did not hesitate. The impossible once again hung in the air, just beyond reach, waiting to be claimed. The canyon seemed to hold its breath with them, shadows stretching long and thin, dust swirling in the wind, echoing the rhythm of fear and anticipation.
Ow.
The mother's mind raced with questions she dared not speak. How could one man face so many threats? How could he guide them through this labyrinth of stone and shadow? And yet there was no time for answers, only action, only trust, only the tense waiting for the impossible to unfold. The pursuers were closing in, voices harsh against the canyon walls, boots striking rock with relentless certainty. The mother felt the weight of every second, every choice, every step that had brought them here. The Apache's presence was a shield, a promise, a force that seemed to bend danger around them, yet she knew that even he had limits. And now, at the edge of the canyon, with the impossible hanging just out of reach, the moment of confrontation was nearly upon them. The boy whimpered softly, and the mother whispered reassurances she did not feel. Every muscle in her body was tense, every nerve alert. The Apache's eyes held hers for a brief moment, a silent command and a promise. Stay with me, trust me, and survive. Got, the mother nodded, heart hammering as the shadows of the canyon deepened. The pursuers closed, and the impossible prepared to take shape in ways none of them could yet imagine. The Apache's eyes locked on the pursuers, reading each movement, each shift in posture. With the precision of someone who had lived a lifetime in the shadows of danger, his hands moved almost instinctively, guiding the mother and her son toward a narrow overhang that jutted out from the canyon wall. Below, the men shouted, rifles raised, but the terrain betrayed them, forcing their movements to be clumsy, heavy, and predictable. The mother felt her heart hammer in her chest, but she could sense the calm in him, a quiet, unwavering force that had already carried them through impossible odds. With a swift motion, the Apache dropped low behind the rock ledge, signaling the mother and boy to do the same. The mother obeyed, pressing herself against the stone, listening to every heartbeat, every footstep. The boy trembled, tiny arms wrapped around her neck, and she whispered, "We're safe now, I promise." Even as she spoke, she knew it was not a guarantee. Safety had to be earned, step by step, and the man beside her was earning it for them both. The pursuers were close enough now that the echoes of their curses ricocheted off the canyon walls. One of them climbed precariously onto the ledge above, scanning for any sign of movement. The mother's pulse quickened, and she held her breath. But the Apache had anticipated this. With a speed that seemed almost unreal, he stepped out into the open, his movements fluid, calculated, and fearless. The man above barely had time to react before the Apache used the canyon's natural contours to his advantage, disappearing from sight in a swirl of dust and shadows. The mother could hardly believe what she saw. It was as though he were part of the land itself, moving through crevices, shadows, and ledges with a mastery that seemed impossible for a human being. The boy gasped softly, eyes wide, and pressed closer to her. "He's like the stories," he whispered, voice trembling in awe. The mother nodded, swallowing hard. She understood now why the Apache had appeared the way he did, why he had carried them through danger with such ease and quiet strength. This was a man who had lived by a code older than the land, a code that demanded courage, precision, and unwavering focus. The pursuers faltered, uncertain now, their confidence cracking in the face of a force they could not understand. The mother noticed the subtle shift in the canyon's energy, the Apache's presence bending the odds, creating openings where none seemed possible. One by one, the men miscalculated, slipping on loose rocks, losing balance, shouting curses that only seemed to highlight their helplessness. And through it all, the Apache remained calm, moving with the skill of someone who had faced far greater danger before, who understood the land in ways they could not imagine. Finally, after what felt like hours stretched into moments, the men retreated. Realizing that the canyon itself, guided by the Apache, was more formidable than any weapon they carried, silence fell over the ledge, heavy and profound. The mother exhaled sharply, finally letting herself relax, though only slightly. The boy stirred in her arms, sleepy now, his fear giving way to awe and relief. The mother looked at the Apache, who had returned to their side, his expression unreadable, but eyes softening ever so slightly as he glanced at the boy. "You saved us," she said quietly, voice still trembling with emotion. The Apache said nothing, only shifted the boy gently in his arms. There was no need for words. The actions had spoken louder than any explanation could. The impossible had been done. The child was safe, and for the first time in hours, the mother felt a sense of peace settle over her. They made their way down the canyon slowly, the tension of the night finally giving way to the quiet rhythm of survival. The boy clung to the Apache, now aware that the man who had performed such impossible feats was both protector and guide. The mother walked close, her eyes scanning the horizon for any remaining signs of danger. But the canyon seemed at rest, as if acknowledging that the immediate threat had passed. As they emerged from the shadowed corridors of rock into the open plain, the first full light of morning washed over the landscape. The mother took a deep breath, the air carrying the scent of sage and earth, of survival and renewal. She looked at her son, who blinked in the brightness, still clinging to the man who had become a figure larger than life, yet human in every careful movement, every subtle gesture. She understood now that courage came in many forms, sometimes loud, sometimes silent, but always undeniable. The boy finally spoke, voice small but filled with wonder. "Who are you?" The Apache did not answer immediately. Instead, he placed a steady hand on the boy's shoulder, a gesture of reassurance and respect. The mother watched them, realizing that this man, so enigmatic and skilled, had not only saved her son, but had also shown him the meaning of trust, bravery, and resilience. Words were not necessary to convey lessons this profound. She turned her gaze toward the Apache herself, her own gratitude too deep for speech. She knew she would never fully understand him, nor did she need to. His presence had been enough, his actions a testament to the strength of character, honor, and instinct. And yet she wondered where he would go next. What other impossible tasks he might face, and how many more lives he would touch with the same quiet determination. As they continued walking across the open plain, the mother allowed herself a moment to reflect. The events of the night had left a mark on her soul, a reminder that life could change in an instant, and that heroism often came from unexpected places. She had called out in desperation, pleading for her son's life, and had been answered by a man who moved beyond fear and limitation. She knew the boy would carry this lesson forever, that courage was as much about heart as it was about skill, and that sometimes the impossible was only impossible until someone did it. The boy finally looked up at her, sleepy but smiling faintly. "Will they come again?" he asked. The mother took his hand, squeezing it gently. "Maybe," she said truthfully, though with a calm she did not fully feel. "But we will face it together. We are not alone." She glanced at the Apache, who walked ahead silently, eyes scanning the horizon as if anticipating the next challenge, ever watchful, ever ready. The sun climbed higher, warming the plain, turning the dust to gold, and the mother felt a quiet gratitude settle over her. The Apache had done the impossible, yes, but more than that. He had reminded her of the power of trust, the strength found in unexpected allies, the resilience that could emerge in the face of fear. The boy walked closer to her now, curiosity and admiration mingling in his eyes as he glanced at the man who had saved his life. The mother knew that this night, this flight, would stay with them forever, not as a memory of fear, but as a testament to courage, instinct, and humanity. As they reached the edge of the canyon and the open plain stretched out before them, the mother felt a sense of closure, tempered by the knowledge that life was never without danger. The Apache had disappeared into the landscape of shadows and stone. Protector who had answered a desperate plea and vanished almost as silently as he had arrived. Yet his presence lingered in their minds, in their hearts, in the very air around them. He had been impossible, unstoppable, and unforgettable. The mother knelt, brushing dust from her son's clothes, her hands lingering on his shoulders. "You're safe," she said, more firmly this time, "and we will keep each other safe, always." The boy nodded, eyes bright with understanding. And she felt the relief bloom in her chest, like sunlight breaking through clouds. The canyon had tested them, the night had pressed them to their limits, but they had survived, guided by courage, instinct, and the silent strength of a man who had done the impossible. For a long while, they stood there together, looking back at the canyon that had been both prison and proving ground. The mother reflected on the lessons of the night, the power of calm in chaos, the value of trust, the bravery that often hid in quiet gestures. She realized that heroism was not always loud or visible. Sometimes it was measured in presence, in skill, in the willingness to step into danger when others could not. And though the Apache had vanished from sight, leaving them with only the echo of his actions, the mother knew that he had changed them forever. Her son had been saved, yes, but more than that, they had been shown the depth of courage, the weight of responsibility, and the quiet strength that could defy fear and danger alike. They carried the impossible within them, now not as a person, but as a memory, a guide, a story to be remembered and shared. As the sun rose fully, turning the canyon walls to gold, the mother took her son's hand and began walking toward home. The boy glanced back once, as if expecting the Apache to appear from the shadows again. But there was only sunlight, dust, and the endless promise of a world that was both dangerous and full of possibility. The mother smiled faintly, knowing that they had survived, that courage had carried them through, and that the lessons of the night would remain with them forever. The canyon behind them stood silent, its shadows retreating in the morning light. The mother understood that the impossible had been done, that her son had been saved, and that they had witnessed something extraordinary. But she also knew that life would always carry danger, that courage would always be needed, and that trust and resilience were the true tools of survival. They had been tested, and they had survived. For that, she felt an unshakable gratitude that would linger long after the canyon had faded from view. With one last glance over her shoulder at the land that had been both adversary and witness, she whispered, "Thank you," though the words were carried to no one in particular. The Apache had vanished, but his presence remained a force of courage, a reminder of the impossible, and a story that would stay alive in their hearts forever. She squeezed her son's hand and began walking, knowing that together they could face whatever the world might throw at them next, guided by the lessons of the night and the quiet, unstoppable strength of a man who had done the impossible.